Hi everyone, this is Jennifer, believe it or not. I am on the tail end of a cold or the flu or something, and it has drastically changed my voice. And so I thought I would just go ahead and record a short video for you all just for kicks and giggles while my voice is so different. So this video is going to be on Userforms. It's just going to be an introduction to Userforms. So let's get right into it. So if you right click right here and go to Insert, Userform, you get this userform here. And let me stop for a minute and talk about what a userform is. A userform is a form that pops up on your screen that allows you to display information to a user and collect information from a user. It allows you to interact with the user. The user form that we're going to be creating today is very simple. It's just going to be a form that's going to be kind of like a souped up message box. It's going to display some information to the user. So first, let's talk a little bit about the user form itself. There's actually two parts to the user form. There is this form itself right here, which is what will get displayed to the user. It's the visual interface. And then there is some code behind the user form. So you see the user form was created here, and if I right click, you see I have an option to view the code or view the object. So this is the object that we're looking at right now, and the code is the code behind the form that allows us to add some functionality to the code via VBA. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name of this form. So I'll just click on the form here, and then I'll click on this property sheet. The property sheet lists for us all of the properties that are available for us to change on this user form. It allows us to set some parameters on this user form. So if you've watched any of my videos on classes, then you'll be familiar with the concept of properties. So for instance, we have here all these different properties: back color, and then there's a value for the back color. That is the back color on the user form. Border color, that's the color of the border on the user form. Border style, you see we have none. We have no border on this form. Caption, you see it says user form 1. That's this right here. And so if we go ahead and change that, we'll just call this message to the user. And you see that as I'm typing the caption, it's changing on the user form itself. We can see it there. And so on and so forth. And these, I just want to digress for a second here. These pairs here, the name of the property, and then the value that we set the property to. This is a very common idea in programming. It's called a key value pair. And I'll do a video about that at some point, but the short version is that you have a key, which is unique over here, and then you set a value for that key, which doesn't necessarily have to be unique. When I say unique, I mean unique in this range of values here. The values over here don't have to be unique. So you see here there's a 0 here, and there's a 0 here. So they don't have to be unique. But these ones are unique. The keys are unique. The values don't have to be unique. But anyway, I'll talk about that more in other videos. I just wanted to throw that out there right now, that this is actually a more kind of general concept in programming. Okay, so let me get back to what I was originally going to do, which is change the name. So I'm going to prefix the name of this form with FRM for form. And then I'm going to call it message. And so now you see the name of our form over here has changed to form message. And you'll note that originally the name and the caption were the same, but now they're different. So this is the name of the form that we'll be using in our code. This is how we're going to refer to this form in our code. And this caption is just the name of the form that gets displayed to the user on the form itself. And so now that we've changed that, I want to go ahead and show you how to run this form. And so we run this form the same way that we would run any other procedure in VBA. So to run it, you just click this arrow, the run sub/userform. It's the same button, or hit F5, and then you see that your user form gets run. There's nothing on it right now. All we have is this X to be able to close it, but you see that there's our caption, message to the user. So we close that. And actually I'm going to make my Excel window smaller so that when we run the form, we don't lose this over here. It doesn't disappear like we saw before. So I'm just going to make these so they don't overlap. Okay, so let me go ahead and run that again. And now you see we can see everything all at once. So now I close that. As we discussed, this is just going to be kind of like a message box. So what we can do with our user form is we can fill it with things called controls. And if you're familiar with controls on the Excel spreadsheet itself, they're very similar on the user form. It's the same concept. So if you've ever created a button on a spreadsheet that you click it and then it runs some code, it runs a macro, it's the same concept here with the user form. We have different controls available that we can put on the form. We can attach some code to them, and then we can run the code to perform some functionality. Okay, so to get our tools up, we had it up previously and then they got closed. The window got closed. You might have seen I was moving it out of the way. So this and I'm not seeing it on my toolbar now, so I think I have this window here a little too small. So let me, yeah, see I increased the size a little bit, and you see on the end here this toolbox popped up, a little hammer and the wrench. So this is our toolbox. So I click that and our toolbox appears. And these are the controls, the tools that are available for us to put on our user form. For this video, we're only going to use one control, and that is going to be this one here, the label, the one with this big capital A. You'll notice that right next to that, there is a control called a text box. And this text box and the label can be confusing, so I want to show you the difference between these with an example from the web, from the internet. So I am on this page for Coca-Cola. This is their contact form page. And so this is just, you know, you've all seen this. This is a contact us page where you submit a question or some feedback or something to the company. And so I want to talk to you about the difference between a label and a text box. So a label is used to display information to the user. A text box is used to collect information from the user. So to look at our example here of a submission form on a web page, these would have different names, but the concept is the same. This would be a label. This is displaying information to us as the user. And this is a text box in the parlance of a user form. It is collecting information from the user. So displaying information to the user, label. Displaying information to the user, label, collecting information from the user, text box. Displaying information to the user, label, collecting information from the user, text box. And let me just put some info in here so we can see the difference. Displaying information to the user, label, collecting information from the user, text box. So that's the difference. So let's come back to our user form and we'll see it. So label, display information to the user, text box, collect information from the user. So again, in this video, we're only going to be discussing labels. I'll discuss text boxes in another video. And so you see, I come back here and I've clicked on this, and my text box is nowhere to be found. I can't see it, and it's grayed out up here. And so what's happened is I have this IDE selected, but I don't have the user form itself selected. So if I just click on the user form, you see that it pops back up, and my button also becomes enabled again up here. Okay, so to add a control, we just click on it, and you see I have this little cross here, and you see the A there to tell us what kind of control it is. And I can either just click, and it will put a label on there for me in a default size, or I can click on it and I can drag and I can make it any size I'd like it to be. Okay, and so I have two labels on my user form, and you see that they have some text in them, label 1 and label 2. These are actually some default properties that have been assigned to the label. So if I come back to my properties window and I look over here, I see that the name is label 1, so that's a default name that has been given to this label. And the caption is also label 1. And that is the text that we see inside of the label itself. So I'm going to go ahead and change the name of this label. And so I'm going to prefix it with LBL. And then I just like to put a little underscore. And I'm going to call this going to be our hello label. And then you notice that, so the name of the label itself has changed again when we're writing code. This is how we're going to refer to the label in the code, but you see that the caption is still the same. And there's two ways to change the text, the caption, the text of the label. And so the first way is I can change it here as we did before in the caption box. So I'll do it this way for this label, and I'm just going to make it hello world. And then I hit enter, and my text changes here in the label itself. And so let's change this one as well. And so the second way to change the text of the label is we just click on it, and we can just type it right here in the label itself. And so this one, we're just going to make, how are you doing? So I've typed the caption here in the label itself, and you see that as I typed it, it changed over here in the property as well. And so I also want to change the name of this label. And so again, I'm going to prefix it with the LBL. And then I'm just going to call this status. We'll get the status of how the person is doing. Well, we're not actually we're not going to get the status. We're just going to ask them for the status. So let's actually make this ask status, label ask status. Okay. And so now we have two labels on our user forms. Let's go ahead and run it. And now you see we see our two messages here. And again, we can't do anything with these. These are just labels. They're only showing information to the user, so we can't actually do anything with them. So close that. There are some other properties we can set. These are all of the properties that we can set on our user form. So if we say, well, that's kind of small, we can make the text a little bit bigger. So if we come to this font property, you see the font face is Tahoma, but if we click on these three, this button with the ellipsis, the three dots here, which I just did, you see that a window pops up that gives us a whole bunch of other stuff we can change as well. So if we wanted to change the way that this text looks, we can change the font face. Say we wanted to make it Times New Roman and we wanted it to be bold and we wanted to make it bigger. We'll make it 16 and we can see down here how it's going to look as we make all of these changes. And so then I click OK to save this. And now we see it's too big. It's actually too big for the label. So I need to make the label a little bit bigger, and I can do that this way. Or I can change it with this. There is a property here called width, where I can change the width of this label box. So let me make that a little bit smaller. I'll make it 100. And now you see the size has been resized here. So let's run that. And you see I get this macros pop-up window with nothing in it, basically. Just hit cancel. The reason that happened is because I don't actually have this user form selected, so the IDE is not really sure what I want to run. So I need to just make sure that I select this. You see I've got this little outline with these squares on the outside that tells me that it's selected, and now if I run it, my user form will run. And so now we see we have this bigger, and that looks a little bit easier to read. So let's change this one as well. And you'll see that these are not aligned anymore since I don't think they were ever aligned, but they're not aligned. So the way I can line these up is I believe there's a way to there's a setting up here in the toolbar somewhere to snap to grid and align things and do things like that. So you can look into that. But the way I do it is I always just use the left. I use this left property. And we see that on this one, the left property is set to 18. But if I click on this one, we see the left property is set to 30. And that's telling us how many units. I'm not sure what the units are, but how many units from this left-hand side of the user form the control is indented in. So this is indented 18 units from the left, and this one is indented 30 units from the left. So if I want to make this one line up with this one, then I just need to change this 30 to 18. And you see that now they are lined up. So for this one, I'm just going to change the font to be the same. I'm also going to make this Times New Roman, bold, and I think it was 16. And then just click OK. Unfortunately, I don't think there's anything on here like a format painter that you have in Excel. That would be really nice, but I don't think there's one in there. And I mean, you can do all this in code as well, but right now we're just doing it manually. And so you see that this one is, it's a little long. That's okay. I'm going to save it like that because I'll show you the user is not going to see how much longer this is. It doesn't matter. They won't see that the label control is a lot longer than the text itself. And it's kind of high, so I will adjust that just to show you this height property. So the height is 48. So let me change that to, I don't know, 30. We'll just make it a little bit shorter. And so now you see it's shorter. Probably could be shorter still, but you get the point. You can mess around with this height setting to adjust the height of the label. And so I run it again, and now you see we've got our message, hello world, how are you doing? And again, we close it here. There's a lot of different properties over here. I'm not going to go over what all of them are right now, or probably ever, to be honest with you, because a lot of them I've never used some of them. There's some that you will use a lot, some you will use infrequently, and some that I've never used at all. So I do want to show you, though, that the properties will change based on the element that we have selected. So for example, right now I have the user form itself selected, and we can tell that because the name is right here, form message. It's the user form itself. And so you see that I have a certain set of properties. But if I click on a label control, you see that the properties change. There will be some that are the same, like height and width are on all controls, generally. But a lot of the other controls have changed because there's some controls, they're contextual. There's some controls that don't make sense in the context of other controls. For example, when I'm on the user form, you see that I have options to set settings for scroll bars. But if I click on a label, you see I don't have any options for scroll bars because scroll bars are not a feature of labels. We cannot put scroll bars on labels. That's why their properties are not listed over here. So another thing I want to show you is I'm clicking on these elements to switch between them. And as you see, it switches here. But you also notice that it's switching up here. This is a drop-down menu. And this drop-down is another way to choose different elements. So you see I choose user form. You see the user form got selected. If I choose the ask status label, then that one gets selected. And if I choose the hello label, then that one gets chosen. So that's another way to choose the controls, and that can come in handy if you have some controls that are kind of overlapping, and sometimes it's hard to click on them, or sometimes it's just easier to find them this way. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the left property. We use the left to adjust the position of how far in from the left-hand margin of the user form this control is. And there's another corresponding one called top. And that positions how far from the top of the user form that the control is. So I'm going to move this one down a little bit. This how are you doing? This ask status label. So if I go to top, you'll see that it's at 66. So I'm going to move it down a little. I'll put it at 90. And you see that it moves it down. And so that's a way to adjust it vertically, and the left adjusts the position horizontally. And so I wanted to show you the difference between the left and the top between these label controls and the user form itself. So as we discussed, the properties change depending on the item that we have selected. But sometimes you have the same properties, but they do different things for different controls or items that are selected. So you see with the labels, we have the left property and we have the top property. But if I click on the user form, I also still have the left and I have the top. But they do something different. So as we discussed with the label, the left is how far in from the left edge of the user form the control is, and the top is how far from the top of the user form the label is. For the user form itself, the left and the top set where the user form is in relation to the screen, your computer screen. So if I change this 0 to 20, and I change the top also to 20, and then I run the user form, you see now the position of the user form has changed. And so it's 20 units in from the left of the screen and 20 units from the top of the screen. And that is your computer screen. It's not the Excel application. There is a way to make it relative to the Excel application. I'm not going to go over that right now. But this default is relative to the computer screen. So let me close that, and I'll show you what I mean. So if I move this down like this, and I run the user form again, see the user form is still up here. It's relative to the edge of the screen, even though the edge of the application is down here. Okay, so that's just to give you a quick overview of how the context of the properties change depending on what element of the user form you have selected. So I don't think I'm going to talk about the code behind the user form in this video. I think that's just a quick introduction, or maybe not so quick. I guess we'll see how long this video turns out to be, but it's an introduction to user forms. And I'll expand on them a little bit more in other videos. We'll talk about the code behind and different things that we can do with user forms in future videos. Okay, so I think that's it for this video. Like I said, it really just was, I was meaning to do a user form video, and I just kind of did this as a lark because, like I said, my voice sounds funny to me, and I thought it would be funny to just make a video with my voice sounding like this. But I hope it wasn't too hard for you to understand me. I know my voice was cracking a little bit, so I'm sorry if it was hard for you to understand me. But hopefully this was helpful to you. And as always, if you like my videos, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you.